Stereotypes are widely held beliefs, usually with little information to support these beliefs. As such, stereotypes negatively influence society. Some stereotypes are both very old and still very prevalent. The dumb jock stereotype is one of these stereotypes. This stereotype came to prominence within ancient Greece, where they believed athletes spent too much time on athletic abilities and could not practice their intellectual abilities. This still persists in our society, and it negatively impacts student athletes. One way this stereotype affects student athletes is through lower test grades. A study on students at Swarthmore College asked a randomly selected group of students and student athletes questions beforehand. Both the experimental and control group received the same questions, except for a few questions where the experimental group received questions about their athletic experience and the control group received questions about their dormitory experience. Those with the athletic questions and admitted to being involved in athletics had lower overall scores on the GRE test. This difference was even larger for male athletes. This could be curtailed if coaches would work to reduce the stereotype with their student athletes.
Coaches are contributors to the dumb jock stereotype, because if a student wants to participate in a particular sport, they are urged to take an easier major. The coaches would rather their players be more involved in the sports than their academics. One can find great success as a professional athlete, but what if they fail? They have nothing to fall back on. If they were allowed to pursue the major they wanted, they could break away from the stereotype. They could be engineers, doctors, or lawyers, literally anything else. But no, they are almost forced into the role of a dumb jock.
Some people perceive student athletes as dumb jocks, with saying that the racial identity becomes a factor. With people trying to find ways to include race with athletes, it is evident that when talking about athletes, African Americans are front and center. There are studies that have been done that show that white people believe that African American student athletes aren't mentally prepared to handle college academically. There is concrete information that states that high school student athletes do not meet requirements that need to become a college student athlete. College football players are categorized when people mostly talk about student athletes being dumb jocks, mainly because of low point grade averages and graduation rates. A survey was done on 538 athletes from a D1 university about their college experience. How do student athletes cope with negative stigma of being an athlete? They only have two options: accept or reject the stigma. The data shows that 35% of students work harder to disapprove the stigma. However, most students accept the stereotype. 32% do not participate in class, 5% do not attend at all, and 16% end up dropping the class. Another way they accept the stereotype is by hiding their athletic identities. 45% do not reveal they are an athlete to avoid stigmatization. To be treated equally, a part of their identity must be unknown. Not being labeled as an athlete allowed them to have a better experience with their students, other students, TAs, and professors. What can we do to end the stereotype? If we start treating them with the same respect as others, athletes will continue feeding into the stereotype. Not attending class and failing only supports the dumb jock stereotype. The fact that athletes feel the need to disconnect a significant part of their identity is an issue. They should be able to be themselves without being judged by others. Being branded as a dumb jock impacts the way a person can feel about themselves. They are not less than others. They are people too. If anything, we should praise them for doing what they love and support them in every way possible.